So let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do tonight. A few people have written to me emails, asking whether this is some type of dating club or some type of matchmaking service or something like this. That's not what I do. So I just want to say this up front. It's not what we're doing here today. Um, One second. Hope you can see me better. Increasing the light here. So, what we're doing is having a discussion and, if you're up to it, doing some exercises to help you, if you're single, enter a relationship. So, let me tell you a quick story where this idea came from, where I got this from. Many, many years ago, I had a client who came to see me. I've been practicing hypnotherapy for 29 years. And years ago, this person, her name was Martha, she came to see me and she told me exactly this. And if you have read any of my books, I mentioned this example or this story in a couple of my books. You may have read it or you may have seen videos about this topic. So, Martha told me that she had been divorced at the time when she came to see me for 14 years, and that during that period of time of 14 years after her divorce, not a single man had asked her out. Now, Martha was a well to do lady. She was good looking. She was, well to do. She made good money. She had a job. What's particularly interesting about Martha is that she was in a job where she was in public evidence. And what I mean by that is she wasn't stashed away in some sort of a basement somewhere where nobody saw her. No, 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 no. Martha was working at a public office. People came in and out, professionals. In other words, a lot of men knew her. And according to her, in 14 years, nobody even asked her out for a cup of coffee. So Martha felt invisible as a woman. Well, we worked with hypnosis. We used hypnosis to help her uncover what the root of the problem was. And one day we found it. And both in the book and in classes or in videos, I typically resist discussing what Martha found within herself. And people sometimes take objection to that. But the reason why I don't discuss the particulars of what Martha found in her own unconscious mind is because I would not like for anyone to conclude that their situation is similar to Martha's. In other words, although you may be single right now looking for a relationship and there may be a block in your own unconscious mind, and that much is similar to Martha's situation, I don't mean to suggest that the cause of Martha's block is anywhere similar to whatever may or may not be the case for you. So I think it's important to keep the perspective fresh here and realize that each person is an individual, each person is different, and your situation might be completely different. We're going to get to the root of what's going on with you, but we're going to talk about a few more things before we get there. I just want to tell you the end of this story, what happened with Martha. Martha had a fantastic, a series of sessions at the office, and a therapeutic process is usually not one session, it's a number of sessions. But one day, there is always that one session that we call the culminating, the climatic session. That is the one in which the client has a catharsis and she discovers what's going on and she releases all those emotions that were trapped in there for, in some cases, many, many years. And she releases all that. That same day, it was a Saturday at 2 o'clock session. I'll never forget that. She gets into her car and goes. My office at the time was on Coral Way. I mean, Bryce is from South Florida. You may know Coral Way and 74th Avenue in Miami. And on 87th Avenue, if you're from this area, you would know there's a gas station there. So Martha gets into her car, goes to the gas station. And I know of this because she told me when she came back a few days later. She's pumping gas into her car, and the man who's pumping gas into his car next to Martha comes to talk to her. She drove a late model car. He came to ask her a question about the car, but every man would know that he was just attempting to make conversation with her, and one thing led to another. And this was in the 90s. So he got her email address. Maybe nowadays he would get, I don't know, but he got her email address. And they started talking over email. And I continued to see Martha a few more weeks. And by the time I no longer saw Martha, that she was done with what she came to get, she was in a committed, profound relationship with that particular man that she met at the gas station. So when that happened, my curiosity was stirred. I figured, I wonder if there's something to this. I wonder if people who are chronically single, as I called them at the time, actually have an unconscious block. And I started wondering about this. And as a result, I started talking about this in classes, on the radio. Back then, we used to go to the radio, right? And people would listen to me talking on the radio and they would call me up and come over. And I tested this. I would say, okay, I can help you get into a relationship, but not by coaching you on how to pick up a man, how to pick up a woman. That's not what I do. I don't do matchmaking and I don't do dating coaching. Both of those professions exist, and there's some fantastic professionals out there. It's not what I do. What I do is I help people change themselves from within so that they naturally become more attractive to a potential mate, just like Martha. In other words, when we change, we become different. And other people see that. And oftentimes that may result in you meeting a person. Sometimes it's a person who already knows you but never paid attention to you. But as of now, they begin to pay a different kind of attention to you and things begin to change. So I know that there are quite a few of you on the line. I'm going to ask, would anyone else like to turn on the camera? I think it would be nice for us to have a conversation. I have a lot to share with you, and I want to show you how you can have this transformation. But I'd like to see you. Would that be a fair ask? I'm here. You can see me on the camera. Mar, Marin, are you all there? Daniel, are you there? Megan, Nidia, anyone else wants to turn on the camera? I don't know if you're there or not. Would you like to say hi? So, um, Bryce, I suppose you're single. Is that why you're here?
Yes.
What is this? We are in a context of confidentiality. It's almost like in therapy. So I'm just wondering if you would be so kind as to share with me, since you and I have not met before, how long you have been single for?
Um, Currently I've been single for about a year.
For about a year. And during this year, have you had dates or have you been on dates, anything like that? How has your experience been, in other words?
I pretty much run from anybody I might be interested in or might be interested in me.
Okay, you run. Okay, that's an interesting. So obviously, if you run, I think we should all run if the person is a creep, right? And there are both men and women who are creeps and very difficult people. And I don't mean any criticism by this. There are people who are problematic and they would be a detraction from our life's purpose. And
Mhm.
perhaps we shouldn't be around them, right? So I totally get that. But there are quite a few wonderful people on this earth. And so it would be a shame to run away from those people as well, because no matter who you are, there's always somebody who's right for you. I firmly believe that. I have married a ton of people myself. I love doing this kind of thing. And I have enjoyed over the years helping people be happily coupled. And as I said, some of them I even married myself. So, Megan, welcome. Thank you, Bryce. And we'll get back to you in just a second. Megan just turned on her camera. I wanted to say hi and welcome you. Would you mind telling us? I suppose you're single if you're here. Is that true? Is that true, Megan?
Yes, I'm single.
How long have you been single? Would you mind sharing with us?
Um, it's kind of I've been divorced for almost 2 years, separated for about three.
Okay. Have you been looking for a relationship or you're not looking? What's your situation?
Um, I was in a temporary, I guess, called situationship that I thought was more than that. And so for a little bit of time, and then I ended it because it was not what I needed. Um, since then I haven't really been looking. I've been asked out. I just am not really not necessarily not interested in engaging. It's just the people have kind of not been what I want or what I'm looking for.
Okay, so in the book, I talk about this. There are two ways in which we remain single. I apologize, I'm warming up my voice. It's going to be fine in just a moment. But there are two ways in which we remain single. One way is we never meet anybody, like Martha in the case I gave you earlier. The other instance is when we keep on meeting the so called wrong people. We meet people, but we don't quite match up with anyone, and therefore we remain single. So thank you for sharing with us. Would anyone else like to turn on your camera and share what's going on in your life? Megan, Bryce, I see several of you online. Who would like to turn on your camera and say hello? Megan and Bryce were brave enough to speak up. I'm wondering, what about you, Daniel? Would you like to say hello? All right. So let me tell you one thing. In these webinars, and I've been teaching since 1990, so it's been quite a few years. And since the pandemic, of course, I've been doing quite a few of these webinars and classes online, and I had a school for many years. So I've been doing quite a few of these things. And sometimes we charge, sometimes we don't, depending on the nature of the program. And whenever I do a free talk, like none of you paid to be here today, it's quite common that the situation happens. Sometimes a person won't turn on their camera, whatever. It's. I've been doing this for a while. I understand that there's there's no investment, so it kind of goes with the territory. But the assumption when I don't charge for a seminar, the conscious or unconscious assumption is that I'm going to turn this talk into a sales pitch. I totally get that. I have been to a ton of webinars myself, and that is typically what happens. In other words, the assumption is that I'm going to give you a couple of ideas and then turn this whole thing into a way of attempting to sell you something. And I want to say this up front because that is the perception and that tends to put people on guard. So I want to tell you, warn you, that that's exactly not what we're going to do. I'm not going to turn this into a sales pitch. I've sent you emails and I'm telling you up front, I make money in two different ways. I sell books on Amazon. It's already a fact. I'm not going to be pitching books on Amazon. You already know that. You can look them up if you want to. And I do hypnotherapy at the office, and you have my email address because I sent it to you in an email. So you have my website address. I mean, if you go to the website, all of my services are there, prices. I mean, everything's clearly spelled out. You already know what I do, what I charge, how I do it, because it's all in my website. So I'm not here tonight to sell you anything. If by any chance any one of you has any interest in looking me up, you already have my information. So I just want to say this up front so that we can put that topic aside and actually get to work. Is that fair? So can we relax our minds now and just actually get to work? Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you, Megan? You can just nod. Does that, yeah? Because otherwise it becomes like everybody's like on guard, waiting. When am I going to transition from a presentation to a sales pitch, right? So I just wanted to say this up front. All right. Having said that, let me tell you something else. Whenever I start working with somebody who's single, who comes to see me because they're looking for a relationship and they're having trouble finding a relationship, whenever, and I've done this several thousand times. I mean, just to give you an idea where I'm at, I've been doing this for 29 years, 44,000 sessions. So I've done this quite a bit, right? I just want to situate where I'm at so that we can communicate. So whenever I start working with a client at the office, the first idea that I put on the table, if you will, is the following. Is the same idea I'm going to propose here to you. Now, the last thing I want you to do is to tell me whether you agree or disagree. That will not help you. Whether you agree or disagree, that will not help you. What I would suggest to you is that you think through this idea and ask yourself, in what way could that be true? In other words, I'm not asking you, do you agree with this? That's irrelevant if you agree or disagree. Who cares about my opinion, right? It just doesn't matter. What does matter is if you ask yourself, okay, this guy is saying something really strange. In what way could that be true for me? So, what I wanted to do with what I'm going to give you a phrase. You can write it down if you want, if you have a piece of paper there or your computer, whatever. I wanted to look at this phrase, and rather than saying, I agree or I disagree, that won't get us anywhere. What I want you to do is to look at the phrase and ask yourself the following question. I'm repeating, ask yourself this question: in what way could this be true for me, or in my case? Is that clear? Do you all get it? Can you do this? All right, so here's the phrase: nobody's single. There is no single person. You're not single. Now, a couple of you have spoken and you said you're single, so you might be thinking, dude, is this guy crazy? Is he not listening to me? I'm totally single. I don't have a boyfriend. I don't have a wife. I don't have a whatever the case might be, right? And the first idea that I wanted to work with is, if he's saying that nobody's single and that I'm not single, in what way could that be true? Because the implication of what I'm saying is the following: if you're not single, that means that you're coupled. Well, and then you tell me, but I don't have a mate. I don't have a boyfriend. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a spouse. Okay, but in what way are you already coupled to someone or to something? That's important. So, my claim right up front, right off the bat, is that nobody is really single. We are already coupled up with something or someone. And let me give you a few examples of what I mean. I have worked with all kinds of people, right? I mean, 44,000 sessions. You can imagine I've worked with quite a few people. So I'll give you several examples. If you ever met a priest, let's say a Catholic priest, and you say Father, that's how they talk in the Catholic Church. If you are Catholic, or if you know of a Catholic, that's how they talk, Father. How can you stand being single? And the priest will tell you, I am not single. And you say, oh, you're married. He says, no, 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 I am. And no, yes and no. I'm married to the church. If you ask a nun, she'll tell you, I am married to Jesus. If you ask an alcoholic, they'll tell you, I am married to alcohol. If you ask a drug addict, they're married to their drug usage. If you ask a person who works 20 hours a day because they're growing a business, whatever, they're married to their job, to their company, to their profession. There's a movie which, when my daughters were younger, we used to watch over and over back on the VHS days, if you remember back then. And it was I remember this movie because we watched probably 100 times. It was called Miss Congeniality, and it was one of those cute movies for children, whatever. No, and what I remember about the movie is that a couple of the people in the movie were like FBI agents or something, And in the context of the movie, they used to say, you know, we're married to the job, right? We are the job. We don't have a life because these are special agents. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm saying in the movie, right? In the fictional movie, these people don't have a life because at any given moment they might be called upon to go do an operation in a different part of the world, and they have to go. They don't have a life. So they're married to the job. So if a person's in the military and there's some type of special agent, and you see this in the movies, I was never in the military myself, but they don't even tell their spouses where they're going. They can't. They're some sort of secret spy or agent, whatever. They're married to their jobs. So anyway, I gave you several examples here, very common in some cultures for the person to be married to their parents. Now, obviously, I don't mean that they're having sexual relations with their parents. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that they're energetically married to their parents to the extent that their emotional intimacy and their emotional needs are satisfied by their parents' opinions. They sometimes live with their parents, sometimes they don't, and they talk with their parents all the time, and it's like they're married to their parents, and there's really no room in their lives emotionally for another person. Some people are the opposite. They're married to their children. or to their pets. Those are just examples. And what I would like for you to do right now is to take just a few seconds and ask yourself, again, not if you agree or disagree with me, because that would not be useful therapeutically, but the very same exercise that we would do at the office, you would do here, and you're going to get the same results. If you want to be in a relationship, in a healthy relationship, we have to start there. And the question is, nobody's single, so what am I already married to? What am I in a relationship with? Is it my depression? Is it my job? Is it my parents? Is it my children? Is it my cats, my dogs? Is it my car, my rifle, my hobby? What am I married to? What is my priority in life that I'm using to replace the space, the emotional space that could potentially be filled by a mate, by a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a wife, a husband, whatever, right? Whatever type of relationship you're looking for. So take a moment. By now I've been repeating this idea over and over because I know that as I'm talking about this, ideas are flowing into your head right now. So take a moment and write this down. What do you believe? Again, the question is not if you agree or disagree. The question is, in what way could this be true? And given that we're assuming it is true for now, if you're single, it means that you're really not single. You're married to someone or something else. And just write it down. I will not ask you. You don't have to talk about it. It's private, it's confidential. Only you will know. But I would like for you to write it down. What do you believe you're married to? Again, the word marriage here, I'm using completely metaphorically, but I think you understood what I'm saying, right? What is our priority? What are we married to? So write that down for a second. And as you're writing that down, I'm going to take a moment to explain something else. I use the word marriage in this work to mean any kind of relationship that is intimate as you define it. In other words, I use the word marriage, but some people say, well, I've been living with this person for 10 years and but I'm not married. Well, from our point of view, from the perspective of the unconscious, from the perspective of the emotions and your body and your mind, it is like we're married, right? So I am not discussing the legality of it. Did you sign a paper in the courthouse? I'm, I'm not a lawyer. I don't do, that's not what I'm doing here. I'm using the word marriage to signify a type of relationship between any two human beings in which there is intimacy. Now, people always ask me, well, do you mean sex? Well, no, I mean intimacy. If I meant sex, I would have said sex. I mean intimacy. Because intimacy is way more than sex. Sex could be a big part of intimacy, but intimacy is way more than that, right? There's emotional intimacy, there's all kinds of other things that go into this bucket called intimacy. So if you're intimate with another human being as you define it, I don't define it as you define it, then we got to use a label. We got to use a word to define that. So in this context in here, just among us, we're going to agree. I use the word marriage to define that kind of relationship. And I say this because sometimes a person comes to see me and they say, look, I'm looking for a relationship, but I don't want to get married. And what they really mean is, I have some property, I don't want to sign a paper, whatever. I get all of that. But what they're really saying is, I want to be married in the functional sense, perhaps not in the legal sense. And that's perfectly all right. But you're looking for a committed, intimate relationship. And that's what I call in this context marriage, for sake of conversation here. We just need a word for it, and that's the word that I use. So I just wanted to clarify that. So we're not single. If we don't have a partner, it's because we're married to someone or something else. And there's no judgment there. There's no judgment there. But I do want to say to you that if you're looking for a relationship that feels good to you, most likely you're going to have to readjust how you interact with whatever it is that you discovered you are committed to. So, for instance, if a person is an alcoholic and they drink heavily every day, again, I'm using this as an example because I have seen this at the office a number of times, right? And they say, well, look, I'm single and I'm looking for a relationship and I cannot get one. Well, that guy, this hypothetical person that I'm using in this example, will probably have to quote unquote divorce the alcohol before he can meet a wife. And this is an example, right? In other words, it's going to be very difficult to balance and juggle both in his life, a heavy drinking habit while at the same time building an intimate relationship with another human being. It's going to be tough, right? So we're going to have to make some choices of priorities there. So sometimes a person comes to see me, they want a relationship, but in an example like this, we're going to have to work on the alcohol first. And I'm not suggesting everybody's an alcoholic. I'm giving you an example of what I mean, that in order for me to form a bond with another person, I have to first let go of whatever it was that was occupying that particular space. So I hope that point is clear. Does anyone have any comment or question before we move on? Any comment or question? It's getting more interesting now. These initial remarks are kind of housekeeping stuff. Okay. So the second point that we have to that we would be doing at the office now. At the office, if a person came to see me, I'm going to work with them until they are in the relationship they want. In other words, I keep on working with you until we get there. It doesn't take long because the world is filled with people. And once we turn on the magnetism, it's a very natural thing. I don't have to look for a partner for you. I don't do that kind of thing. But I know that if we turn on the magnetism within, you'll find the person. Like I told you in Martha's case, sometimes the very same day, sometimes soon thereafter. And Martha was a very attractive woman. She met this man at a gas station. At a gas station. So people sometimes think, oh no, I have to go to a particular type of restaurant, whatever. Now, yeah, for some people, yes, it might be. But Martha met him at a gas station. True story. In other words, the world is filled with people. It's wherever you are potentially attracting your ideal partner. So let's move on. I think, yeah, I read your comment. I just wanted to address this. Daniel, you're married to your career. I applaud you. Okay. So you want to develop your career. I applaud that. I think it's awesome to work hard to build yourself up and to take care of your finances. I think that makes you a stronger person as a result of that. That is clearly a good thing to do. However, when it comes to a point where it becomes a bit extreme to the degree that it encroaches into that emotional space inside of your heart that could be occupied by a spouse, and I call a spouse or a relationship, then we might be pushing it a little bit. It's up to you, right? So in this case, if a person came to see me, let's suppose Daniel came to see me at the office and we discussed all of this at length, and we concluded, yeah, his involvement with his career is so extreme that there's no emotional room there for a spouse, then we're going to have to make some adjustments. And oftentimes that is the case. Marriage to the career is a big one. I gave you the example of the FBI agents in the movies, right? So that is a very common one. But it's this is where the value of these conversations come in, right? Because when a person becomes aware of something and they acknowledge that to themselves and they write it down, as Daniel just did, now we have an opportunity to choose again. It's like, okay, now I finally admitted to myself, I'm married to my career. Okay, all right, that's fine. You have that right. There's nothing wrong with it. It's your choice. But just as I have chosen to be married to my career, I can also choose now, if I want to divorce my career and find a spouse. Now, that doesn't mean that you quit working. It just means that you adjust how you work. That's all that I'm saying. So we have that choice. And the choice is completely yours because you do have the right to be married to your career or anything else that you choose. Megan thinks that she's married to her kids. Megan, I'm with you. I this is very common. And I'm a father. I have 4 daughters, and I totally respect that. I think that for those of us who are parents, it's a very easy thing to slide into. If you're not married and you do have children, it's very easy to marry them. And again, I don't mean anything inappropriate about this. What I mean is, please, I'm talking strictly from a symbolic, metaphorical, mental point of view only, right? Otherwise, we're talking about a crime. That's not what I'm discussing here. I'm saying married to my kids. Yeah, it's like, my kids are my priority in life, and I do everything for them and I'm always with them. Well, it's going to be difficult to find a woman or a man in Megan's, whatever, right? It's going to be difficult to find a partner because we're always involved with our kids. I certainly have been there. And again, nothing wrong with being a great parent, but we have to ask ourselves if we're exaggerating a little bit too much to the degree that we're using the kids to substitute for a spouse. And then if we believe we are, we have an opportunity to choose again. We can make adjustments. We can make adjustments. I'm not suggesting that we should stop being a mother or father. We just make adjustments, right? That's all that I'm saying. So that's the first exercise. Now, at the office, for instance, person came to see me, they want to be in a relationship, they cannot meet anybody. This is the first exercise. Sometimes, I give you examples, sometimes it takes weeks, and we do hypnosis quite a few times for them to divorce whatever it is that they were married to. I give you the example of alcohol, for instance. That might take a while, that might take a few weeks for us to get rid of the alcohol so they are in a position to eventually meet someone. In Daniel's case, he mentioned his career. That's all right. Sometimes it takes weeks to readjust, to make changes so that we can create space for a spouse, right? So the first step is to uncover what it is that we are already married to, because my assertion to you is that nobody's really single. We're all married to something or someone. Sometimes we have um, they use the word situationship nowadays. Yeah, I have this friend, we get together periodically, whatever, but there's no harm, there's no commitment there. Where and there's no judgment. It's not wrong or right. It's not about that. What I am saying in those cases is that although we believe there's no harm being done, and there is no harm, but that person energetically, emotionally, the situation that we're involved in does occupy a place in our hearts, in our lives, in our time, in our minds. And there's something there that is essentially keeping that particular space within our hearts occupied, making it more difficult to meet someone else. So, again, sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's a job, sometimes it's a habit, sometimes it's, whatever the situation might be. We have to uncover that and undo that. And that's always the first step. The second step is to actually define. Notice, everybody will tell you, if you've been single for a while and you go to webinars and conferences, people will tell you, well, tell me what kind of person you want, right? And they start defining the partner. I went to see a movie this weekend, by the way. I don't know if anybody saw it. I think it was called Materialistic. It was a very, very interesting movie. I really liked it, by the way. And it's about, this group of people who are matchmakers. I thought it was a great movie. And the clients who come to the matchmaker have a list of requirements. I want a man, I want a woman who's like this, like this, like this, like this. They start off defining the person. The assumption there, notice, the assumption there is that if I meet the right person, I'll have the experience that I want. That's the assumption in the matchmaking model. And I'm here to tell you, in my experience, 44,000 sessions, and I married a bunch of people myself, I can tell you it does not work that way. It doesn't. A better way to think about it, or at least a different way to think about it that I'd like to suggest to you, is this. Rather than defining the kind of person you want, in other words, rather than you saying, I want a man who's 6 foot tall, makes $250,000 a year, he's like this, he's like that, he drives a black car, a white car. Instead of defining the person, I'd encourage you to define the relationship, not the person. Say, well, what do you mean? Isn't that the same thing? No, no, it's not the same thing. It's quite different. So I'll give you an example. Rather than me saying, I want a woman who's tall, this, that, rather than thinking of the woman that I want, I would say to you, I want a relationship in which there is growth. Notice the difference. I want a woman who's tall versus me saying to you, I want a relationship in which there's growth. Do you see how those are two very different categories of things? In one case, I'm defining a person. In the other case, I'm defining the relationship. Now, the tall woman versus the growth relationship, those are just examples that I'm making up right now. You have to define for yourself what kind of relationship you want. Don't worry about the person. Let's focus on the relationship you want. What kind of experience you want to live? Some people want to be married to somebody who's a little bit of an avoidant. Do you all know what an avoidant is? And they enjoy that because they're avoidants themselves and they need a lot of time away and free time by themselves, alone time. So they can't really be with somebody who's not an avoidant because they need lots of time alone. And that's perfectly all right if you're that person, if that's what you want, if that's what you like, if that's what fulfills you, that's perfectly all right. But in that case, what are you really looking for, right? I'm looking for a relationship in which I have lots of time alone. Notice, I'm not defining the person, I'm defining the relationship, the experience. So the first step is I'm not really single, I'm already married. To what or to whom? And am I willing to divorce that? The second step is let me define the relationship experience that I want. I want a relationship in which we have a good deal of fun, but also a good deal or a great deal of growth. We work together, and I don't mean necessarily in a job. We work together on the relationship, and that's work sometimes. I'm just giving you an example. I'm not saying it's always like that. I'm giving you one example. To me, a relationship involves a lot of work, and I want a woman who's going to work on the relationship with me, but then we can also have fun in between. See, I'm giving you an example of a definition of a relationship. I never told you anything about the woman. I'm telling you about the relationship itself. Now, write it down on your journal there what kind of relationship you want. Now, I got to tell you something about this. Do you know what most people write it down? Write down? Because at the office, we do this exercise. If you come to see me to do this program, you're going to bring your journal with you. It could be your phone, right? You can use the notes on your phone, but you're going to have some type of journal. I suggest that people write by hand on a piece of paper because there's something more real about that. But we're gonna use a journal. We're gonna have to journal, and in the book, I talk about the same thing. And most people, when we go through this exercise the first time, they don't write down about the relationship they want. Do you know what they write down, most people? The relationship they think they should have. I'm telling you, we are all programmed to believe that we should have what we've been told we should have. I'll give you an example. My mom thinks I should marry a doctor. So when I talk about, okay, tell me what kind of relationship you have. Well, I want to marry a doctor. How come? Well, I just think they're good people to marry. Okay, but why? No, no, I just want to marry a doctor. Okay, but why? And you press the issue and you question the person. Turns out that, well, because my mom said so. But do you want to marry a doctor? They're going to be gone all night in the emergency room. Do you want that? Well, come to think of it, no, not really. Okay. So you see, uh, and again, this is just an example, but you got to think through this situation. Ask yourself, what kind of relationship do I want? Not what I think I should want. I'll give you a very, very touchy and difficult example of this. When it comes to sexual orientation, for instance, some people believe that they should be with A or B type of partner, but when in reality they really want something completely different. That's just another example. So the question is, what kind of relationship are you actually looking for? Again, this is completely confidential. This is between you and you. But what I am telling you is that, listen, if I go into the car right now and on the GPS in the car, I enter an address that is south of me, when in reality, I mean to go north, the GPS is going to, it's going to draw a little line on the map and it's going to take me to a completely different place. I have to put in the right destination into my mind if I want to get there. So if I really want one type of relationship, why should I be telling myself that I want a different kind of relationship? You see the point I'm making here? Now, you might think that this is a little, of course, we only have an hour here today, and when, when we explore this more deeply, we realize that we all have ideas about relationships that do not match what actually complements us. So it is like entering the wrong address on the GPS. We've been telling our minds, find the person who is 10 feet tall, find the person who's 10 feet tall. And when I ask you, do you really want the person who's 10 feet tall? And again, I'm using this as an example. Says, no, actually not. Okay. But you're putting the GPS of your mind, that instruction, and your mind is looking for that in the world. You're attracting that, and there's nobody that matches that definition. It's not even what you want. Oh, but my mom told me when I was a kid that I should marry somebody who's 10 feet tall. All right, but that's not what you want. So it's time to do what? What is it that we've been talking about? Write it down. Choose again. Up until now, I have been looking for 10 feet tall people. Again, I'm using the example of 10 feet tall. What I wanted to do is to write down what you have been searching for, that perhaps it's not what you actually want. So write down what you actually want. I'm not going to ask you to talk about it. This is private, but write it down, because once you write it down, you can actually, for the first time, choose again. So what do you really want? What kind of relationship? Not the kind of person, the kind of relationship first. You have to be able to define the kind of relationship you want first without putting the person in your mind, without figuring out a person. And then the third step. So, what's the first step? Who remembers? The first step is, I'm not really single, I'm already married to something. We gave you some examples here. The second step is, well, what kind of relationship do I really want? And the third step is, what sort of person could provide me with that experience? So, if I want a relationship in which we're always climbing mountains, the first thing I need is somebody who likes to climb mountains. And you might say, dude, that's so obvious. I know. Now, substitute the concept of climbing mountains for what you want. You have to open yourself up to a person who also wants that kind of relationship that you defined. So the example is, if you want to always be climbing mountains, again, this is an example, put your words in there, then you need a person who also enjoys climbing mountains. Do you see the point I'm making here? We oftentimes end up in miserable relationships, and then we give up and we stay single because we don't really know what kind of relationship we want, and we end up attracting people who cannot guess the difference between what we say we want and what we actually we want. So therefore there's conflict, and eventually we say, oh, this relationship thing is too hard. Let me tell you, the relationship thing is meant to be the best part of your life, where you have the most joy and happiness and fun. That's supposed to be the best. But for a lot of people, it's the worst. And worse yet, some people just give up because they're not having a good time. So let's do this step by step. And you got to use your journal for this. Write down what kind of relationship you want, and then write down what kind of person would give you that experience. Now, once you begin to do this, and if you do this over time, and if you write down on your journal, like in the book, I go through all of these exercises one at a time in detail, and I explain in detail, and I tell you what to write down in your journal, whatever. And we do the same thing at the office. The only difference between reading the book or being in a seminar like this versus coming to the office is that we use hypnosis at the office. We actually do this. We use hypnosis to achieve all of this. Therefore, we actually get it done. We actually get the transformation done at the level of the unconscious. I give you examples, right? The alcohol, all those examples. We actually take care of those things so that we move from step one to step two to step three to step four. We actually move forward. And that's when we have those big realizations, and people end up meeting a person and entering into a relationship. Some of these people did want to be married and asked me to marry them because they felt so happy, and it's so much fun. I love doing that, right? So we're going to define the kind of person that can give us that experience. So let's suppose this guy is a man, right? The man comes in to see me, and he tells me, I'm married to my job. I'm using this as an example. I don't mean to refer to anyone here. I'm married to my job. Okay, we have to work through that. Why you're married to your job? What's going on? Are you afraid of not making enough money? Are you competent enough during the day? You should be working 8 to 9 hours at most. How come you're working 15 hours a day? Maybe you need more training, whatever the case might be in that man's life. And again, I'm picking this as an example. We have to go through all of that. Sometimes it takes a few weeks, a few months. It doesn't matter. And I say it doesn't matter because oftentimes a person has been in that problem or with that problem for years, always meeting the wrong person, always heartbroken. So what does it matter if we take 2, 3 months to do this? It really doesn't matter because they've already spent 10 years doing it and it still didn't get it done. So whatever. But anyway, that's step number one. And then they define the relationship. And invariably, they tell me, wow, I discovered that what I really want is not at all what I thought I wanted. Okay. You know, I'll give you one example that may be controversial to some of you, but I can tell you that this happens at the office. Person will tell me, I want a woman who's independent, who works hard, who's this, who's that. Okay, that's fine. When we begin to do this exercise, they tell me, actually, what I want is a woman who's traditional, stays home, takes care of the kids. And I'm using this example. There's no right or wrong here, by the way. There really isn't. There are all kinds of choices out there in the world, but I'm using this example to show you how different it can actually be what I tell you I want from what I may actually want. It could be very, very, very different. Imagine a man who starts off saying, I want a woman who's independent and works hard all day, to eventually concluding, well, actually, what I really want is a woman who's very traditional and stays home and raises the kid. This is an example of a stark contrast between what I came in saying that I'm looking for and what I'm actually looking for. Now, what happens if I enter into the GPS of the car to opposite addresses? There's no way to do that. Which way am I going, north or south? There's no way to do it. So, when we have that kind of confusion in our minds, the mind stalls. We cannot find that person because the mind is looking for two opposites simultaneously. It's like going right and left simultaneously. We cannot look, we cannot find, we're not attracting that person. When we get down to the core of what it is that we're really looking for, it becomes really easy. There's almost like, metaphorically speaking, a radar in the mind that sends out a signal, and we home in on the person that completes us. And that's exactly what happened with Martha in the beginning of this conversation. She met that man that very same day. So I define the kind of relationship I want. I figure out the kind of person that would give me that relationship, or that we could have that relationship with, I should say. And then, and this has to be done in hypnosis, right? Then we go into hypnosis. I imagine the person in front of me, and in my mind, I have a conversation with that person. In this conversation, I ask the person in my mind, this is all in hypnosis, this is all in my mind. I ask the person if he or she would be willing to enter into a relationship with me. Now, I have never seen a situation, and you got to remember, I've done 44,000 sessions. I have never seen a situation in which a person doesn't start crying when we do this exercise at the office. Now, one thing is to imagine the exercise, another thing is to be in deep hypnosis and actually do it. Because in deep hypnosis, it feels to you as though this ideal person to you, whom you have never met perhaps, is actually in front of you. It actually feels that way. There's nobody there, but in your mind, it feels that way. And then you ask that person, would you go out with me? Would you be my wife? Would you be my boyfriend? Whatever the case is, right? And invariably, the answer is no. Why do you think that is? Well, because my own mind is saying no. That's why I'm still single, right? Do you follow what I'm saying? And when we ask the person in hypnosis, how come it's a no? That's when we uncover what that block is. Remember, I told you Martha's story, and I told you that she was kind of stuck, couldn't meet anybody, and then she had a catharsis. That's how she got to the catharsis. That's how I discovered this methodology. We did this exercise. She was able to imagine the perfect man for her in deep hypnosis. And in her mind, she asked his man, in her mind only, in hypnosis at the office, right? She asked him, "Do you want to be with me?" And he said, "No, because X, Y, and Z." This is all in her mind. There's no man there. This is in her mind, right? But that X, Y, and Z made sense to her. Why? Because it's her mind talking. There's nobody there. She's in hypnosis. So she knew what the problem was, but she knew it unconsciously or subconsciously. And what this exercise did is it allowed her to extract out of her mind what the objection was. We went through that exercise in hypnosis where you clear, we call this a catharsis, you release those emotions. That very same day, she met somebody. Now, does everybody meet somebody the very same day? No, not everybody meets somebody the very same day, but soon thereafter, because you become naturally magnetic to what belongs to you or belongs with you. So, in a nutshell, this is the method. And as I tell everybody, I tell people in classes, in podcasts, on the radio, in the book, you can actually do this method. It's spelled out in more detail in the book. I mean, if you choose to purchase a book on Amazon, I get like 50 cents or something. The purpose here is not to sell you a book or anything. It's on Amazon. You can pick it up. But the purpose is to stimulate a particular type of thinking within you. If you are single and you want to be in a relationship, perhaps this conversation was sufficient for you to realize that we're going to need a mindset shift. It isn't a matter of learning how to dress, what restaurant to go to, what kind of pickup line I should use on that woman. It isn't about that, as you have already noticed. It's about me becoming naturally attractive or magnetic to the person who compliments me. It's a very specific thing. Attraction is a very specific thing. You could walk into a room, there could be 100 people there, but there's an attraction with one person and it's mutual because the kind of attraction we want is mutual, right? What do I do with a person who's attracted to me that I'm not attracted to, or vice versa? Can't do anything with it. There's no connection there. There's nothing. It's not going to happen, right? If one person is attracted to the other, but the other is not attracted to the one, there's nothing there. It's not gonna happen. So the one person that we're looking for is the person where there's mutual attraction. But I'm not just talking about sexual attraction. Obviously, that's a part of it, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about attraction in a much more profound way, much more globally. So actually, at the office, in this context, we don't use the word attraction, we use the word alignment. And we reserve the use of the word attraction for what it is. I feel attracted to you, right? There's an attraction. I'm interested, I'm curious. That's an attraction. But what we're really looking for is alignment, because when there's an alignment there, there's a fit. It sort of fits, and there's no effort. We fit together. Our lives work together, and then they can develop a relationship. Of course, they're going to have to talk and get to know each other. I'm not saying it's magic like Disney World, but at least you have a chance. All right. So this is the method. Now, when you look at what people spend over the years in terms of dating, going out, frustration, years looking for a partner, whatever, dating sites, and when you put it all together, the best investment you can possibly make in your future is to do something like what we do. I have documented this year after year. It's a fantastic investment. So don't my only suggestion as a consumer, I'm a consumer as well, right? My only suggestion is when it comes to you, you know don't be afraid of investing in yourself, because you are your own means of production. If you're happier, if you're healthier, your life is going to be better, and for sure you're going to make more money. So I should log off right now because I have to log back on by 8 o'clock. We have 2 minutes left. There may be other questions. I see a few questions here in the text box. If you have any other questions or if you want to reach out to me, please do so, and I'll be more than happy to continue the conversation later. So awesome relations life is the website, awesomerelations.life, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you in person. Thank you. Have a blessed evening, all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.